All right, thanks for coming. So I'm Brian, and I just wanted to bring this up. So the topic of today's conversation is going to be AI and design, and I just wanted to start off with some of this exciting stuff. And these are going to be resources for educators, how you can start working with this stuff right away. But I'm going to turn that off for now, and I've got some slides. I'll go through the slides. If you have any questions, just interrupt me. And I'm going to get kind of high at a concept level, but then we'll take it back to a practical level for anybody that's looking to put together a classroom or wants to try to start to teach this stuff. Okay. Hello, I'm Brian Kane, and thank you for coming, and thanks to Clark for inviting me to this wonderful opportunity. Really appreciate it. So the title of this session is The Idea Hose, and it's all about AI and design doing. And what I'm going to try to make the point here is that when you start to work with AI, there's an unbelievable amount of ideas that are going to come out. There's so many new things that can be done. The room for innovation is just staggering. But you need to run it and combine it with design thinking in order to make that happen. And it's a great path for educators and for students. So who am I? A little bit of my background. In the 1980s, I worked with 3D computing for the holography and entertainment industries. And then in the 90s, I invented some live interactive video software, worked with online gaming, and worked with robotic software for about a decade. And then in the 2000s, I worked as a creative director for the gaming business, and I did UX work for e-commerce and financial industries. And then in the 10s, I got invited to teach at RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, and taught there for about 7 years in the industrial design, apparel, and film video departments. So that's who I am. So a little bit of what we were doing at RISD. So the first thing I did there was my friend Catherine and I started what might be considered the wearables program. Although I really dislike the word wearables, and I like to call it fashion interaction instead. So we really focused on a design perspective and creating things that are compelling and interesting, but always fashion first and coming from an artistic perspective. But because it's a very hands-on course, you have to actually make these things. And there's some examples of some of the student work that we did. And I just did another course on that this January. So that's sort of ongoing. Okay, design thinking, what is it? That word gets used all the time. This is Design Thinking 101 from Don Norman, from the Nielsen Norman Group, and this is really what I consider to be the essence of design thinking. And it's a circular process that we use professionally, and you can use it academically as well. And the key to that is that it's an iterative process, so you go through this cycle over and over and over again, trying to get something that's increasingly better, whatever better is. And you start by empathizing. And what does that mean? That means studying the people that you're going to make something for, really understanding and getting into their head and getting into their life. And typically as an assignment, I'll do that as an observational exercise. So I send the students out and they have to go photograph people in the real world doing things. So then you take that and then you start to get into a more conceptual thing where you start to design, or you start to define, what you think the parameters are of this thing that you're going to try to solve, but it's still kind of theoretical. You do some exercises for that, and then you take those and you ideate, and that's when you start to actually come up with real ideas for what might satisfy the solutions. And then you get into prototyping, and that's what the prototyping is king for me. So I like to get to prototyping as quick as possible, so it's extremely hands-on. And so the idea of getting to prototyping as quick as possible is it helps you get out of your head. Right? It's very easy to get into a theoretical space where you're trying to think of something, but you never actually start. So it's all start by starting and start making that thing. So prototyping is everything. And then you go and test it on real people. And that's the key. So you thought you had an idea, and then you made something that represents that idea, and you, as quickly as possible, put it into somebody's hands. Very, very quick. And then you start to see, does my idea and the thing that I made that represents that idea actually work, right? So if it did, then you can go to the implementation phase, which if you're making a product means you're going to bring it to market or whatever it is that you're doing. But if it doesn't, then you just go back again and figure out why didn't this thing work. And so we go through multiple iterations of the cycle, creating multiple prototypes and figuring out what it is that we're actually making. Okay, so what is AI? Right? That's a really complicated topic. Everybody's talking about it, nobody's really sure what it means, and I take a very different definition than maybe your computer science folks might, and that's an interesting conversation. But from a design perspective, I define AI to be when a machine makes its own decisions, because that's when you have a user and you have some type of system. That's the primary interaction that you need to design for. And it's very, very different than anything that's ever come before. And the other thing that's interesting is the computer science people get upset about this. It doesn't have to be real AI as long as somebody thinks that it is. And that gives us an advantage when we go to do design work. So something might be, there might be a device that's wandering around the room and it looks like it's doing smart things, but there's somebody behind there that's driving it around. But to the end user, it doesn't matter. They think it's making its own decisions. And so that becomes the primary area that we want to focus on as designers. And that's my definition. Okay, so we had design thinking, but in my world, I redefine that into design doing. So the doing part to me is the most important part, because that takes it out of the theoretical and into the world of the concrete. And so everything that we do, especially in the classroom, it's geared towards, okay, that's a great idea, now go make it and show me that tomorrow. It sounds great, looks great in your deck, and you did a beautiful rendering of that, but I don't care. Go make it and show me that work. So design doing, and it's learning by making. So taking which is very core to the RISD mission, but we get hands-on, right? We make things. We're constantly making things, and that's the core to how we learn. So how does that work? Start by starting. Figure out how to start working as quickly as possible, and don't necessarily try to create a master plan, and don't try to think everything out too far. Start by starting, and work fast. How fast? Really fast. So typically, I'll give 1 week assignments, so the students have 1 week to come up with an idea, execute it, test it, and bring back the results and be able to show me that in 1 week. So you got 1 week. And frequently having that insane time pressure actually gets the best out of the students, right? So you can fake it to test it as well, and we want you to fail quickly. Failure is the key to good design. And I think that runs kind of counterintuitive, especially to the education world where people are always trying to succeed. But your failures frequently are going to teach you more than your successes, right? So we like failure, and we have this thing that we call happy accidents, right? So we're always looking for happy accidents, and don't be afraid to fail. So sometimes I'll give students an amazing, I'll give them the best grade because they did something that was an utter complete failure, but the way that they did it, they learned something really interesting in that. So don't be afraid to fail. And prototyping is king. So we're not gonna, in my class, you're not gonna make a PowerPoint presentation. You're gonna make this thing. I wanna see it, whatever that is. It has to work, maybe. And you can fake it to test it. So you might have a complicated idea that instead of spending 8 weeks to figure out how to make this thing, you can fake that. And there's lots of different ways to fake things. And designers are really good at that. Magicians are really good at that. Entertainers are really good at that. But if you can make a fake thing in a day that you can test on somebody, do that. Because that's going to give you the information that you want as a designer to go to your next level on your iteration, to make your next iteration. And then think beyond function. So this is a big topic for me. So typically, a lot of design and certainly a lot of engineering is geared towards problem solving, but problem solving doesn't always make things that people like. So you have to think about the emotional and design issues and things like when you think about fashion, all shirts are basically the same, but why did you pick that one? This is emotional design. So you want to think about factors that are outside necessarily of problem solving. And that's really important. And then test on real people. So I brought up a little video. Let me click on this real quick. I'll show you, I brought an example of one of these 1 week assignments that we do. And put everybody on it's both fake and it was 1 week, and it yielded some great results. So let me show you this.
Every time you kiss me, I'm still not certain that you love me. Every time you hold me, I'm still not certain that you care.
Let me give you a little setup. So what this is, this group of students, and it's their idea, not my idea, right? So they wanted to test what if the elevator, instead of having a button, had a facial recognition system. So instead of having to push the button, you just walk up, it sees your face, and it calls the elevator. Hey, that sounds great. That sounds like really super futuristic. It's awesome, like so high tech. So what they did was they built a fake device that had a GoPro on the inside with a little camera, and they put it over the button of where the button went. And then there was one of my students was sitting off on the side looking like he was studying, but he had a button in his hand with a mechanical switch that could push the button, right? And he's watching, so here's the recordings that came out of that.
Though you keep on saying you really, really, really love me, do you say the same words to someone else when I'm not there? Suspicion, torments my heart. Suspicion.
All right, so that's one of my favorite moments, right? So this is something that we all, as designers, we know this stuff. So you think you have this great high-tech solution, but people are used to doing things a certain way. So almost everybody that encountered this elevator was confused, didn't know how to use it, and that's a great example of that. This was in our class building. That student has probably been doing that for 3 years. He walks in and he goes like this, and that's like part of his routine. But all of a sudden, when something changed, I don't know how to use this. It's new, it's alien, it's foreign. So these are the types of design human factors that we're looking for.
Keeps us apart. Suspicion. Why torture me? Every time you call me and tell me we should meet tomorrow, I can't help but think that you're meeting someone else tonight. Why should our romance just keep on calling?
They're trying to push it. There's no button though.
Why am I so doubtful whenever you are aside? Suspicion, torments my heart. Suspicion, keeps us apart. Suspicion, why torture me?
So that's a 1 week prototype. That's the type of work that we do, but that yields actual real usable data. So we know that, hey, this is this cool high-tech thing, but guess what? It's confusing. People couldn't figure it out. And if we're going to go to implement it, we need to really think about how that interface works. And then if they wanted to, they could have gone to the next level. But this was the kind of thing, it's like, okay, you got 1 week, go run and do it. And so that whole thing in 1 week, they brought back the videos and we watched it in class. Great students, by the way. Okay, so let me move back to my deck here. All right. Did I lose my, okay. So now I'm going to get into a kind of an abstract area. So AI is involved with thinking. And on the left, I brought up the emotion machine cognitive architecture, which was written by Marvin Minsky at MIT and flushed out by Bo Morgan. And that's a linear bottom to top model that deals with how thinking works. So AI is essentially about thinking. Right, and if you're interested, I can explain what these different levels are. The built-in reactive is like if I put a match to my skin, that's reactive, right? And then learned reactive is if I put a match up to my arm and I know that that's going to happen, and I pull my arm away because I've learned that. Deliberative means that as soon as I see a match go up, I try to get away from it because I'm making a decision. Reflective means I did that and therefore I know something about fire. Self-reflective means I did that and that says something about me. And then self-conscious, that's an interesting conversation we don't need to get into. But then persuading, which is the area where UX designers, user experience designers work, that's all about persuading. And that has to do almost exclusively on an emotional level. And the persuading side is really, really dominant in advertising and marketing, interface design, interaction design. And this is what we use to design products that people love. And that's a very, very different set of factors. And I can explain those too. So scarcity is, well, you better get that because there's only 2 left. There's only 2 rooms left at this hotel, so you better book it now. Authority is, this was rated #1 by the hotel guide, so it must be good. Social proof is, well, everybody's staying there, so I'm going to do that, right? It must be great because everybody's doing it. This video has 50 million views. It must be good, right? Commitment and consistency means that I've done this before, so I know I'm always going to get the exact same burger when I go to McDonald's. It's very consistent, right? Reciprocity is I gave you something, you're going to give me something. So if you go to a website and it says, enter your email, well, why should I? What are you going to do for me? So it might say to you, hey, just for coming here, you're going to get 2 raffle tickets if you put your email address in here. And then liking is... Oh, you like OLC? Yeah, I love OLC too. We must have something in common, right? So, but when you put those 2 together, you get into something that's incredibly powerful, and that's what's emerging right now. And you're seeing a lot of this go on in the AI world. But they have they're pretty good on the left, and they're not so good on the right, and they can be put together. And I have some exercises if anyone's interested on how that would work. And those are the 6 principles of persuasion by Robert Cialdini, if anybody's interested. Okay, so once we understand that, once we understand thinking and persuading, we can start to talk about this thing called mental models. And so mental models that's what we walk around the world in our head. We don't even realize that we have mental models, right? But what's happening, since AI is new, it's a fundamentally new medium, and every time a new medium comes along, people try to do it the old way, right? So the first movies were like plays that were put on film, and then all of a sudden when they had soundies, they were when sound came along, and that kind of crushed, but the people that were making silent films didn't figure out how the talking movies worked, and then when the internet came along, people tried doing web TV, and they thought that they were going to put TV on the internet, and that didn't work. So each new medium needs a new thinking. And you can see that happening right now, in particular with this concept of autonomous cars, right? And that's the example I like to use. And if you think about it, a driverless car is essentially the same thing as a horseless carriage. Right? It doesn't, that car that you see there is probably not what an autonomous vehicle is going to be like, but that's just because we just strapped some new hardware on the top, took the driver out, and said, now it's driverless, right? So, when the horseless, and you can see that's exactly what the horseless carriage was. It was not a car yet. So we're at this time where we can rethink everything, and we don't need to bring these old mental models with us. We want to think outside our old mental models because they may not help us get to the next place, right? And the other example that I do in class is, what does a key look like? I don't have a whiteboard here, but I'll have someone come up to the whiteboard and they draw what they think a key is, right? And then I say, but what's this, right? So these are mental models, and so it's really important to break out of your mental models when you're trying to do innovation and you're going through design thinking, because if you're stuck on what you think something is, you may not see what it can be. So these are the exercises that we do. Okay, talking about mental models, when I say AI, that's what everybody thinks of. And so I really want to make that go away. This is, I think, the number one thing that if I want to get across in this conversation is let's make her go away. It's a whole separate breakout session into why she exists, who's making her and all that. But this concept of like the killer, the killer humanoid robot, that's really has nothing to do with the reality of AI. It's really just this silly archetype that we keep dragging along with us, but it's actually working against the industry, right? So let's make her go away. And over drinks we can talk about why the tech industry needs some psychoanalysis and why she keeps showing up. But that's like a separate conversation. What does that mean? That means that we need new narratives. And this is where the students are really great at this. And there's definitely a generation gap between someone my age and the younger people. They have all these new stories that they want to tell, and they're not necessarily the same, because we need to stop making what we've seen in sci-fi movies. It's really important that we throw away this vision of the future that we've been fed for the last 50 years. And you can see that with what the tech industry is making, right? They're literally making products that came out of Star Trek from 50 years ago. iPads, talking computers, self-driving cars. There's no actual creativity there. They're literally just making the stuff that they saw as kids, and that's their vision of the future. But that doesn't need to be what things are, and odds are it won't be that. And you can understand that when you, excuse me, if you look back into the 90s when the web was first emerging and everybody had predictions about the information superhighway and all this kind of stuff, online education, what we've got is not what was predicted. Right? Nobody predicted Twitter, right? Nobody predicted Facebook. These are new things that emerge from the medium. So we need to find new narratives. And in order to do that, we create these tools that are narrative generators. So we use this in class. That big circle is one that a grad student of mine designed. It's a tool that we can use to create new narratives, and it's just to get us thinking. And so, what did the microwave say to the toaster, right? These are the stories that we want to actually think about. That's a complicated question, right? So what you have here is you've got, around the outside, you've got the core human emotions. I mean, there's more, but those are kind of the core. And then on the inside, you can take the objects in our life and you can put them in there, either how they make you feel or if you want to think about what that might be. So you can wonder about, what is a happy blender? What would a happy blender be, right? And if you had a happy blender and you had a depressed television set, how do they communicate, right? So what did the happy blender say to the sad TV? And this seems kind of silly, but using that, we can start to write these stories that become really, really interesting, and those stories tell us what to make, and then we can test that. And even though that seems very silly, right now there's this big push where all the objects in our lives are getting attached to the internet and they're talking to each other. We've got smart homes and phones and apps and all these types of things. So it's really not outrageous to think that, within a couple of years, like most of your objects or your appliances in your home, in your car, in your office, on your body, are going to have ways to talk to other things. So if, let's say that you come in and your phone knows that you're in a certain mood, well, should that do something to the lighting or should it do something to the sound? And if so, should everybody know that that's what's going on? Should everything? It's really interesting. And then another way that we do it is it's a mind mapping technique, which is very similar to the magnets on the refrigerator that people like. And that's on the left there. So what we do is we map out all of these concepts. We map out the concepts, the locations, the objects, and the ideas that are associated with AI in general, storytelling, objects, and then we cut them up and put them back together, and that very quickly puts us in a place where we can have a gazillion new ideas. And it's really, really fun. And these are things that you haven't seen on Black Mirror. You didn't see it in the last Star Trek movie, right? So that's where you start to get into entertaining storytelling prosthetics. Well, what's that? That's actually really cool. Wow, maybe people with prosthetics actually want them to be really cool and tell a story about themselves. Maybe they would love that, right? Maybe if you're going to get a prosthetic on your arm, you want it to be unique and you want it to tell a story about you. Oh, that's really cool. Okay, go do that, right? Borg work animals. What does that mean, right? I don't know. We figured that out. I mean, is that like a horse with some type of electronic system that can talk to it, or or that knows how to feed it, or I don't know what that means. A street culture closet? That's kind of interesting. I don't know what it means. A car enlargement store? That's a place I want to go to. But the point is that once you break this thing down and you start really thinking about it creatively from a design perspective, we can come up with so many new ideas. It's just endless. And if you have 100 ideas and you work on 10 and one of them works, that's amazing, right? And so these are techniques that we use in class to get to the next level and to break out of this idea of like making what's been done before. Right? So one of the things, and this has been a little bit of my research, that I think is the most important thing for designers right now. So let's say that you have a system that can make decisions on its own while it appears to be alive, right? And so what happens when objects come to life? Well, now we're getting into a place that's not in our cognitive mind at all. It's like deep down in our lizard brain, because as human beings, we need to figure out what's going on with these living things. And so the first thing we have to think is it friend or foe? And that's why I brought up that picture. You look at a cat, you think it's a friend. We have a really great relationship with cats, even though that cat could jump up and have you dead in 30 seconds if it really wanted to. And we're afraid of spiders, even though spiders in general are not really a threat. But there's something about them, the way they look, the way they move. Maybe we discovered it when we moved a box and we found a spider and we're, right? Whereas if a cat's walking down the street, you're probably not going to be afraid of it. So we really need to think about that initial moment when something looks like it's alive. How are people going to interact with that? And that's not a thinking function. That's a very emotional response. So the movement means that it's alive. So what do we know about that? So abstraction can be more curious. So there's this uncanny valley, this concept of the uncanny valley. So when you keep on trying to make something more realistic, even if it's off by 2%, it's very weird. It's like, has anyone here seen Sophia? The Sophia AI robot? It's just weird and creepy. It's very strange. So we can abstract it back and we can start to think about, well, what happens, like, let's just work with a cube. Let's simplify it. Let's see if we can create interesting, cool motion out of a cube and see if we can get it to be expressive and responsive in a way that somebody actually feels that it's fun or it's interesting to play with. Cartoons are fun. We know that. And they're less threatening than something that appears to be perfectly realistic. And if you think about the Pixar movies, they intentionally keep things on the cartoonish side. They don't try to make it perfectly realistic. It's more engaging. It's more fun. And then Clark's going to love this one. So then there's this concept of synthetic or simulated, right? And so I kind of fall on the synthetic side. But what am I talking about? So think about when electronic music started, right? The goal was to create simulated instruments. And along the way, they made some really odd sounding things because they couldn't do it right yet. They were just starting out. Then they eventually made a perfect electronic piano that looks and plays and sounds just like a piano, and guess what? No one cares. But along the way, this other style of music emerged that's based on all these weird synthetic sounds that people hadn't heard before. That's where the new and interesting stuff is. So I think that, and we're seeing this a lot now, where they're trying to get that simulated thing perfect. Like, I want to have a perfect chatbot that seems just like a human, and I want to have something that can generate a picture that really looks like a person, or I want to have it generate a song that sounds just like. That's, I think, actually the boring side of the equation, and I think that the synthetic side is where all the action is. That's my opinion. And basically what we're doing, if you look on the right, we're inventing new species, which is, that's a new thing for humanity. We are literally inventing new species for people to interact with, and there's zero knowledge about how people are going to accept it or not accept it, love it or hate it. It's a really, really interesting moment right now in human evolution. I want artists, designers, and students tackling that. I'd rather have it come from that side than from big corporations. That's me. Okay. So once you've started to play with that, one of the things that you realize is we need machines to make mistakes. We need them. They have to make mistakes. First of all, they're going to make mistakes. And secondly, if they don't make mistakes, odds are you're not going to like it. So if there's a person that's always smarter than you, looks better than you, performs better than you, and always has the right thing to say, that's probably the person you're going to hate the most. Because we are flawed as humans, and we appreciate flaws outside of us. The thing that's perfect makes us feel small, and we want to relate to things that are imperfect. In addition to that, AI has to make mistakes, and I'm going to talk about that. And it needs to make more mistakes than traditional software. And I brought up Wall-E here. So in that story, which is a great story, everybody loves Wall-E. He's all dented and dinged up and rusted, and he's got a cockroach for a friend, and he spins around, and he does silly things. And then you got Eve, who's like super perfect and slick, and she's not very relatable, right? But, and this is more of a design thing. So if you look at that, that's Apple. That's like all these new products that are coming out are like perfectly rounded with like no buttons and just one glowing thing. That's what's coming out of Silicon Valley right now. And they're trying to make these like perfect things. I think it's a losing proposition. So as a designer, product designer, I would bank on the Wall-E side more than I would on the Eve side. Okay, so once you start to work with AI, and this is easy, and if anybody's interested, I can show you how to do this for zero cost in class. But once you start to work with how AI works, you realize machines need to make mistakes. So what I did, this is some of my own personal artwork, because I'm an artist, and I ran it through Microsoft's natural language vision processor. And it has no idea how to deal with things that aren't like very, very common or ordinary. And the mistakes that it makes are kind of fun, right? I mean, they're interesting, but look how off it is. And this is the state of the art right now, right? It has to make mistakes. And when you throw anything at it, you know, if you take a picture of an apple, it's probably going to tell you, you know, that's a red apple sitting on a table. Oh, there it is, a red apple sitting on a table. But these things that I threw at it, it has no idea. And so it's really, really, really important to be able to deal with that mistake when a user encounters that. And there's all sorts of videos on the internet when Alexa makes mistakes. It's really fun. People love that kind of stuff. But it has to make mistakes, and it's going to make more mistakes than typical software. And there's this other aspect where it has to get trained and it has to learn, which is really interesting. I'll talk about that in a moment. So what's it like to live with these smart products? So, excuse me, we've done some observational research. Observation is the key to user experience research. We actually watch. We don't listen to what people say. We watch what they do. So we've gone out and watched what people do. And the primary thing that I would say is the difference is that you give up control for convenience. So that's a fundamental shift about the way that we think about tools, especially, but in software in particular. So if you think about the LMSs that are being made here, or something like Microsoft Word, these programs have become incredibly complicated, and the goal of these products is to give you absolute total control over everything, to the point where you're never going to use 98% of the features in that product. But as you're using it, you want to feel like you're in total control. When you're using a smart thing, it's much more like saying, go get me something that I would like for lunch, or get me a sandwich. And you're going to trust that it's going to make the right decision for you, right? You're actually giving up control in order for convenience. But when I go and I've watched people use this, for instance, there's an AI-backed website generator. Designers hate it because they can't nudge it over 1 pixel, and you have to trust. So that's the primary thing about living with smart products. The other thing that's really different from a product design perspective is that they improve over time. So typically, you know, the best experience you're going to get from one some product that you buy, you went and got a new iPhone, and it comes in this amazing package, and the out-of-box experience is great, and when you turn it on, that's the best it's ever going to be, and then over time, it's going to get yucky, and then you're going to get a new one, right? So we design things, what, 5 minutes? 10, okay. All right, let me skip a little bit of this. I'm going to move forward. So they may need training, and then there's this thing about backlash culture. So without getting too deep into it, AI may be approaching what I call the GMO moment. So it's gotten so much bad press that people are starting to say that they don't want it. And there's this whole backlash culture, and I bring that up with vinyl turntables that are so trendy now. It makes no sense, right? But yet, there you go. It's important. Okay, so what are the lessons that we've learned along the way? So, excuse me, so don't replace people. And that comes from, I do this presentation for businesses. Don't replace people. That's the one thing that's making people the most scared. There's all these headlines about how everyone's going to be unemployed and the robots are going to take your jobs. They're not. But as a designer, don't replace people. You want to work with people. You connect people emotionally. There's a huge demand for that, and AI is in a great place to do that. I think companion, friend, and pet, and not assistant and agent. And so I've only got a few minutes left, but when you think about our relationship to pets, it's really a fascination to me. They don't really do anything for us, but yet we love them and we spend a whole lot of time, and they can make mistakes, and they're not that smart, but they're a really, really valuable part of our life. So we've been spending a lot of time researching how people relate to pets and why. Why is it cute when the cat walks on your keyboard? It's not, right? And if a computer makes a mistake like that, you hate it, but your cat, you love it. So thinking about those is really important, and we need artists, comedians, writers, and musicians in the lead roles on these projects because engineers don't have the background in narrative and storytelling and emotional design. So I've been trying to encourage industry to actually put hire a comedian to lead your team on this next product, or a musician, because they understand narrative formation. All sorts of opportunities. I'll skip through a lot of this. Smart memes is the one that I think is the most fun. I can talk about that after the breakout. There's all sorts of opportunities to invent existing objects. The research potential, and from an educational perspective here, the research potential is massive. It's a gigantic field that nobody's even started to touch on. They're doing, and it doesn't have to come from MIT and Stanford. It can come from your online class if you think it through. There's unbelievable breakthrough research that can come from that. Bespoke models, I'll skip over that for now, but there's opportunities for people to create AI models based upon their very specific local knowledge, as opposed to something that's huge. AI celebrities are coming along the way. The first AI painting just sold for, I think, like $500,000 at auction. And then there's a need for all sorts of universal indicators that haven't been invented yet. So you want to know if a car is coming down the street, is it a smart car? Is it in smart mode? Because you're going to react to it differently than you would a car with a human driver. And that needs to be established in the same way that we have universal graphics like at the airport. That hasn't even been thought through, so there's lots of opportunities there. Creativity engine. Okay, so this is something that I'm pursuing that I think is interesting. So a lot of what's been done, so when you think about I want an AI to generate a face of a person that doesn't exist, well, who cares? I mean, all you're doing is making something that's exactly like something that we already know. But as artists and creatives, we know that the new things come from transforming old things. And so we can program an AI to take concepts and transform them. There's a list of different transformations that we use typically. And so that can be automated. And so we've got this device that can come up with automated creativity, which is really, really cool. Yep, go ahead.
A question from online. When you say bot or not, what is that referring to?
Okay. So you go on your Facebook and you think you're having a conversation with someone, but it's not. It's a bot. You're talking on the phone, and they've got the voice technology so perfect that you think you're talking to somebody, but it's not. And that's happening a lot, and people don't like that. So there needs to be a way to know, yeah, this is a real person, and no, this is a bot. And there's a lot of implications to that, but there's a whole lot of confusion, and it's really frustrating, and people don't like it because they think they're engaging in some kind of fraud or that they're being manipulated. So there could be a little icon or something that goes that says, this is a real person, or no, this is an automated response. So creativity engines that's my personal fascination, and I think that's about to happen. I'd like to be in that. And these are the trends, so I'll leave it there. I think I got 2 or 3 minutes, right? These are the trends I see happening right now. Low cost, garage, invention, and education. That's why we're all here. So finally, it got to the point where you don't need a $5 million IBM supercomputer. You can actually do it on very, very low cost tools. I brought one here. I'm sorry that the online people can't see this, but this is a new device that I just got from NVIDIA. It's cost $99. It's a tiny little computer that's got a GPU built in on it and all sorts of libraries that's set up to start doing AI. So you can use this in the class right now. $99. There's nothing stopping any educator anywhere from getting involved with AI with their students. And there's also a whole lot of open source and other types of software that's easy to use now. Local intelligence. So a lot of AI products right now are based on something in the cloud. So you're going to do something on your computer, and then it's going to connect to the cloud, and Google's going to do it. The new thing is to have it local on the object, and that's a big thing. Mixed intelligence. That gets back to this don't replace people. So that's using a human and a computer to do something that neither of them could do on their own. That's what I think the really hot sector is right now. Flavored internet. So, right now, AI is sort of like the NutraSweet of the internet, and they keep on pouring more on, and it's sort of affecting the overall experience. So you think you're doing something, but it's like, wait a second, that's not what I expected it to do. They're trying to be too helpful, and it's actually not. And I think that's going to go away pretty soon, because I think people actually want unscented internet. And then Big Mother. And so Big Mother is just this idea that if you've ever stopped to think about, should I post that? Should I do that? Everything is monitored. Everything's being watched. So there's this Big Mother thing going on where it's like, and I think that's going to go away too, but it's a trend right now. And then, of course, fake everything. Maybe you've seen some of this stuff. None of those are real people. They were all generated. So if you can generate fake text, fake pictures, fake sounds, everything is being generated, fake everything. And there's this thing called deep fake. So that's sort of a big trend right now. But again, because I think it's new, I think that's going to peter out over time. I got a quick video here that I can show you what I've been working on, because I love this whole garage and invention stuff. So this is a product I'm working on. Let that go because time is short. So that's some very, very sophisticated stuff that's going on. There's image recognition, there's robotics, and the total cost of the parts of that is under $200. So if you're smart, you can do incredible things right now if you're thinking the right thing. This is accessible in the classroom for educators at every single level now, and the most creative things are going to come from the people that get hands-on using that. And thank you.
Folks online are wondering
All right,
if there's
made it on time. Thanks for coming.
Real quick, online, is there a URL for that last video you showed, or a search term in YouTube that we can find it on?
No, because I probably shouldn't even be showing it, because actually that's a prototype for a real product that we're bringing to market in the next 12 months. So unfortunately, no. But thanks for asking. Any other questions? So this is, that's my last slide. That's in general what I tell everybody in every audience, what we're trying to do right now. Tell stories, make magic happen, do something wrong. I think that's the most important thing, especially in education. We really want to encourage our students to make mistakes, fail early, simplify, and have fun with everything. That do it?